Hiya, welcome back to Dunnock Studio. I thought we'd have a little look at something that I get asked a lot, masking tape. Now masking tape can be used in art in all sorts of different ways. One of them is stretching paper, but I'm not doing that. I don't stretch paper. I have paper that's got enough thickness so that I don't need to do the stretching. There's lots of people who do stretch paper, and I'm not one of them. So if you want to learn how to stretch watercolour paper, just pop that into YouTube search and you'll be able to find lots of people to show you how. So why would I use masking tape? Well, one of the main reasons is to just put this down so it doesn't move or buckle quite so much. This is just a piece of practice watercolour paper. It's got a slight roughness to it. It's not quite cold pressed, it's more towards the rough, so I can feel a little bit of texture there. So a way I would use this would be to stick it down around the edges. I like to paint and create a nice crisp edge when I've finished, so I tend to use masking tape. But that can be a problem. It can tear paper, it can get stuck, all sorts of things, and it can ruin a perfectly good picture. So how would I put this on? First of all, I would try and buy a low tack version. We can get them from art stores, and decorators use low tack tape in certain circumstances. It's worth exploring, looking in your DIY shop. So if it isn't low tack, it's quite a sticky tape, and that's when you end up tearing it. So what I do is, before I put it on, imagine this is my clothing, tear a piece and then literally pop it up and down on your clothing, your trouser leg or your sleeve, wherever easiest to do, before you stick it onto your paper. And then that way you're taking some of the stickiness off. So that's tip number one, to try and reduce the risk of tearing your paper when you've finished. It's very sticky, this one, very sticky. Doesn't have to be perfect. If you do like your picture enough, it will end up in a frame which would hide this edge anyway. Another way of using this technique is if you're doing a card, a greetings card, is you keep the edge tidy, so when you finish you tear this off. So I'm now going to pop some paint on here, some description, and then we'll see how the tape comes off. So you can probably see that I've made the surface of the paper wet with a big brush, just splashed water right across it, and I've got some hills and valleys going on here. Can you see them? So the paper is buckling up slightly. Now I don't mind this at all, because I know once this is dry I can flatten it out again. I can either put it under a pile of books overnight, spray the back of it first, that helps sometimes. I've never not been able to frame a picture because I didn't stretch the paper first. So try and keep your paper so that it's got a nice weight to it. About 140 pounds or 300 grams per metre squared is a minimum weight. If you go heavier than that, obviously it's even better. It's not, you can literally pick up your piece of card. It's much thicker, so it's nicer to paint on, in my opinion. That's just me. You might like to have thinner paper and stretch it and go down that route. So this is nice and damp, so I've got some colours here. I'm going to just pop in some cool blue, which is Prussian blue. It's quite watery. Now because my paper's damp and it's got a nice roughness to it, it's going to hopefully give me some texture. And then I've got a colour called Sunlit Green, which is really just a warm green. So take any green that you have and add yellow, and you will work your way towards this sort of colour. So get this colour on, allow it to merge and blend. So you can see I'm painting right over this tape on the edge, so just keep going. I haven't really left any pale areas particularly, this is just to show you. So I've now got a really wet piece of paper, and that's where you get the valleys, so that yes, that can affect your painting, and that's why people sometimes like to stretch their paper. For me, this is just a practice sheet. I actually quite like being able to do things like this with it, so I'm not ever going to worry about that, but each to their own. So I'm going to now get that dry, and oh, before we do that, something I do like to put on for texture is some salt. Any salt will do, so you can just sprinkle it from a height, either a lot or a little, maybe all over, maybe not. I tend to put it on when the paper is still very, very damp, as you saw I did then. So I'll now get this dry, and we'll see if we can get that tape off. So this video is not about the painting. I thought I'd just have a play with this. Now, because I dried this with a hairdryer, you can see all the problems you get with wet paper, hairdryer, speeding things up. So I've got some back runs here, I've got a weird little thing going off over here. Now I don't mind this, and I've got a little bit of salt showing here, but if I'd have left this to dry naturally, it would look so much better. So if you can have the patience to walk away, go and make a cup of tea, take the dog for a walk, then I highly suggest you do that, to give watercolour time to do its own thing. So I've done some lifting out, I've done some sloshing around, I've made a mess. This picture would probably be consigned to my scrapbooking. But if I was going to go back over this, I would get some pens out and have a bit of fun with some texture on the bark, etc. So I could take that a lot further. But we're now going to try and get this tape off. This is all dry. You can feel it's dry by putting your hand, the back of your hand. So what most people do is to just get hold of that and pull. Now the first thing to remember is to pull the tape away from the paper. So you're going at a 45-degree angle. If you can remember that. See, I'm always pulling away from the paper. I'm not pulling alongside the paper. Going nice and slowly. Got a bit of the puddle under there still. Excellent, one piece of masking tape off. Now I can celebrate and think, yay, it's going to be fine. And then of course this is when you find it isn't fine. So that worked quite well. Another tip is to get your hairdryer and slightly warm up the tape. That is one technique that people use. So I'll keep going. Now if you put tape on and go away and come back the next day, it's much more likely that that tape is going to have stuck to the paper. So realistically, if you're putting masking tape on and you want it to come away cleanly, the best thing you can do is to get it off as quick as possible. So this one's been on no more than an hour. So trying to pull sideways, you get the idea. I'm doing quite well here, this is very unusual. It gets a bit more awkward further away it is. Obviously you would be picking this up and turning it around, make it easier for yourself. So there we go. So to be honest with you, I didn't expect that to come off, and it has. So popping it onto your clothing first to get rid of the stickiness definitely helps. And then you get a nice border around your picture. So to show you one that's slightly better picture than that one, something like that. Now this one's interesting because the trees have actually been made using the masking tape, which I'll do on a different video. Essentially these thin trees in the middle are thin masking tape and the bigger ones are thick, but there's a certain technique that you can use to make them look more natural. But again, this nice edge. So if you never frame them, they just look nice. They look perfectly okay as they are. For me, it just finishes them off. But obviously, if you're throwing lots of water around, it stops them curling up on your board while you're painting. So that's the best way to keep your paper fairly flat. It's not going to be perfect. So let's try some other papers and see how we get on. Here we go. This is Cardi paper. It's made from recycled cotton. It is about the same thickness. Well, I haven't got a weight on this one, but I would have said it's pretty similar to what I had earlier, about 300 GSM or 140 pounds weight. And I've actually put something on here previously to have a little play with some texture. You may or may not be able to see something on there. So I thought we'd just have a little splash again. But say for instance, I was now going to paint something and I thought, well, this is just too big. So another way of using masking tape is to mask off a smaller area. So perhaps we could cut this into 4. So I'm going to do what I did before. This is going on my clothing and pop it across the middle there, just roughly. You notice I'm not pressing it down hard. 1, 2, 3 on my clothes and then across the middle there. So this is a really good way of creating small paintings for cards, etc., and for doing swatching and testing out different things. So I'm now just going to paint this little bit here. So I haven't actually, I haven't stuck this one down to the board here, but I could do. So let's go for it, see what happens. So we'll get an edge from the tape we put across the other middle parts. And this is just bog standard masking tape. That's a technical term. Okay, I've got a couple of slightly different colours, so let's have a little play with this one. So I've got some raw sienna, which I'll pop across the top here. Raw sienna is a lovely colour. I'll throw some of that green we had in earlier. And then as I come down the page, I'm going to throw some nice dark in. This is really, really lovely dark. Try and get it to merge in. So this one is an interesting, can you see how it's, as it's spreading out, you can see it's got blue in it. It's called Lunar Blue, and particularly nice colour. I'm going to stick some of the Prussian blue in that we had earlier as well. And let's have a little look. So on the back of here it tells you what is in the pigments that are in here, and this has black and phthalo or phthalo blue. So it's a mixture of black and blue. It's one way you can find out what's in your colours and try and mix them yourself. Not all tubes have that information on, but if they do, it's quite a useful exercise. So this is spreading out quite nicely. I could do all sorts with this. I didn't have damp paper to start with, so I could just spray. If I get my spray to work. Nope, it's not going to work today. I'll come back to that. And the paint is spreading out. You can see it's a rough texture. I've put some like a glazing texture on here, which is just splitting the paint a little bit. So this is a nice little exercise for playing with colours, perhaps creating abstract landscapes, etc., seeing what comes out. Again, I would not normally dry this. I'd let it dry on its own. I wouldn't touch it. But we're here to see what happens with the masking tape. So we'll wait for a little while. Okay, so I've actually left this one pretty much to dry on its own. It's still slightly damp here. I had a play with a narrow rigger brush, dragged some of the paint around. You can see where this lunar blue has mixed into the raw sienna and made some nice greens, sort of abstract-y type of thing. That's the reason we're here, is to see if we can get this off. So just move these out of the way. So just like before, you start to peel, get a feel. You will know if it's going to come. Is it pulling, is it moving, or is it sticking? So this one is different in the sense it's made of cotton, not wood pulp. So that one worked. Wow. Let's try coming right across the middle here. Now this is harder because obviously you've got one side or the other. You can perhaps sort of try and alternate it so you're not pulling completely straight down. But once I get to this picture area, I'm more worried about the picture than over here, so I'm going to pull sideways again. A little bit of a leak there, but that's fine. Makes quite an interesting edge actually. When you get to these corners, you just sort of pick up the next layer. Whoops. Away we go again, pulling away from the edge. Success all the way along the sides and the bottom. Right, let's just try a little experiment. So I'm going to pick up the edge of this one, and then instead of taking my time, I'm going to go straight across. Surprise, it worked. So I think we can say that cotton cardi paper is pretty tough, because that did really well. You know that if I was doing you a proper painting, that this would have all torn, but because I'm showing you how to use the tape, it hasn't, so you can never tell, can you? So anyway, that's one way you can make a large piece of paper smaller and get a nice finish on the edge there. Other things that can be used instead is, as we explained earlier, the low tack masking tape. So this one, you don't need to do the trick with the clothes, you can just pop it straight on. Now this ones can be quite interesting actually, because it's not so sticky, it sometimes lifts. Washi tape, which a lot of people have if they're into crafting. I've got two different thicknesses of that. Now I have got this. I generally wouldn't use it to mask out things because it feels like a real waste of pretty tape, so I don't tend to use it, but I have got it, so actually perhaps I should use it. So I've just done some random shapes there. This is again a rough paper. It's Bockingford, which is a very good made in England paper, which is pretty tough. So I've just stuck those on, given them a bit of a push down. Let's try the ordinary one, trying to be mischievous, not put it on my clothes, just stick it straight. Really push that on. I think you can see what I'm trying to do here. Okay, so we've got those. I'm now going to put some colours on here, just a dark colour, and we'll see what happens. So I've sloshed some paint on, I've gone right over the tape, and one of the first things that happened was the washi tape leaked under here. I also speeded up the drying with a hairdryer, which does tend to lift this tape because it's thinner and less sticky. So just to bear that in mind. Again, another reason to let it air dry. So let's see what happens. Let's go for the top one. Let's peel this tape off. A little bit sticky. This is rough paper, so it's a little bit of grip on it. That one came off okay. And that one came off okay. See, the bocking foot is pretty good. Low tack, thinner tape, very low tack, much less tacky than the washi tape actually. And finally the one I literally stuck on. Let's see what happens. Again, trying to go both sides. Do you see what I mean? You pull on one side and then you pull on the other side, so that you're trying to not do a straight pull off. Get that nice hard edge. So this is masking tape, but you can use it in paintings the same way as you use masking fluid to mask off areas. And again, didn't stick, so good old bocking foot, perfectly okay. So if I just turn it like that, you can see how we've got the beginnings there, if we wanted to, of a tree painting like this. So that's just worked really, really well. And I'll be honest with you, I cannot believe that I've shown you all these different tapes, hair dryers, the whole works, and none of them have torn my paper. So this is really, really interesting, because if I'd have tried to show you a perfectly finished painting, it would have bound to have torn. So just goes to show, doesn't it? Okay, I've got a little postcard pad here, which is really nice for swatching. This one's actually a little bit heavier, it's 350 GSM, whereas the one we were using previously was 300. So it's a little bit stiffer card, which is really, really nice. Again, I've put the low tack tape on this one, and it's a thin one. I've speeded up the drying, and now I'm going to tear these off. Not being particularly careful, and got a splodge there, because the low tack, you will find, tends to leak underneath more, especially if you use a hairdryer, than the tackier tape does. So you gain in some ways and lose in others. Right, finally, can you see that? I have just torn the paper here, because I wasn't being careful. It was maybe still a bit damp under there, and I've torn some of my painting off and got it on the tape. So even the low tack tape has actually created that there. So it happens to everybody. It's taken me the whole video to actually show you that. She's really weird. It's happened on the low tack tape, and that's probably because this was still slightly damp and I was rushing pulling it off. So nevertheless, a very nice little bit of pattern, whatever you want to do. So my advice to you is, do not ever worry about masking tape getting stuck on your paper. It is what it is. It's going to get stuck sometimes. You're going to tear your painting sometimes. You can get around it by using other ways of painting. Use thick paper. Don't ever mask anything off ever again. But then you'd lose all the fun of experimenting with your watercolours. So don't get worried about it. If it happens, just stop and then try and peel it back from the other direction, so that you can try and avoid carrying that tear on. So you will find that you get used to it, you work your own way out to deal with it, but hopefully some of those tips have helped you, for you to be able to try and approach it as carefully as you can without losing the fun element. If you can't have fun while you're painting, there's not much point really. So as I say, this wasn't about stretching paper with tape, it was about masking off the edges or masking off across the picture itself, as we did when the beginnings of a painting, for instance, like that. So it's good to get to know which papers you've got that tear more easily than others. In my particular case, the low tack tape and the thickest paper tore. So sometimes you just can't actually work it out. There's no rhyme or reason to it, so don't get worried about it. And happy painting, and I'll see you on the next video. Any questions, please drop them in the comments, and anything you'd like me to make a video on in the future, please let me know. Bye for now.